Recently, I made a video about what I like and dislike about Fang's story. Now, I gave it more thought, and if you feel like I was overthinking the matter before, you've heard nothing yet. Hello, it's Leaf with yet another video about Sandrock's socially inept doctor. So, as I was dissecting Fang and his story in my typical chaotic way and trying to make sense of him as he is now, I came to several conclusions, but let's start from the beginning. I used to think he would be bitter and cynical rather than scared and paralyzed by his trauma, that he would be cold and tough rather than helpless and malleable, that his antisocial behavior would be more of an informed choice originating in his callousness rather than a result of debilitating social anxiety. And then I realized that, I was wrong, he's obviously different. But it's not like I didn't have a reason for my initial interpretation. He actually does come across as distant and hostile. At first, he doesn't want to talk to us, and we can't gain any friendship points. It can be interpreted as social anxiety and fear of strangers, but then he says this famous line.
Useless banter, rather time for herbs.
Well, it's not fear, he is annoyed. He doesn't want to talk, he wants to work. Then, when we become friends, he has this line.
In the beginning, I was criticized for my pitiless approach to medicine. But a certain amount of detachment is required to perform efficiently.
Well, it certainly doesn't sound like this fragile creature we tend to see him as nowadays. So, when did he change? And did he? It seems that there are two conflicting visions for this character's development because he exhibits two types of behavior, almost like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which is not that far-fetched considering even his bird seems to have multiple personalities because of the voices he mimics. Anyway, sometimes Fang seems very cold and callous, and sometimes he's just soft and helpless. We tend to think of him as a meek, awkward child because he's been like that in most of the latest quests. But signs of him being, well, maybe not a jerk, but definitely not a pushover, are still there, like the clinic roles. This whole sign is basically him shamelessly saying, if you want me to treat you, you have to put up with me. Here's the deal, take it or leave it. It doesn't seem very weak, it feels kind of threatening. But then, how he actually communicates with his patients, especially if he has no one to do the talking for him, is a completely different story. Like, that sign was actually made by someone else, and he tries to use it and be firm about it, but his resolve crumbles at the first sign of trouble, leaving him absolutely helpless. And of course, let's not forget the first thing he does in the game, his medical tests. He runs those tests on volunteers who not only are not informed about the risks and the like, but they are actually misled by X, who does the classic snake oil salesman stunt. And Fang doesn't stop him. In fact, the whole operation is rather unethical. True, it's mostly played for laughs, but when we think about it, it's clearly something that only someone unscrupulous or extremely driven would do. So, small wonder many people initially expected a certain Machiavellian element in Fang's personality. Some even hoped for the mad scientist type of story arc. I didn't, to be honest, I was more into the whole defrosting thing. In any case, in later stages of the story, he becomes almost too delicate. So I was like, wait, did I imagine him being kind of thorny? And the answer is no, I didn't. He is thorny, or rather, sometimes he is. So, okay, we know that indeed he can be distant, unpleasant, and even calculating. So how is this supposed to work with that naive, vulnerable side of him where he seems to lack all agency and just allows us to manipulate him into a relationship with us, be it friendship or romance? Well, first of all, those things don't necessarily collide. Warmth and coldness, or determination and inaction, can absolutely coexist in one person. And duality is actually a rather important thing about Fang. So it could be that those apparent inconsistencies are actually done on purpose. The only thing that really stands out as self-contradictory is the fact that he manipulates people into becoming his guinea pigs, and at the same time he claims to hate deception. And he is very particular about it.
I won't forgive shysters. Don't lie. Again.
So, he hates deception, but at the same time he creates his medicine using questionable methods? Well, the only way I can explain this is that he doesn't see what he is doing as deception, because he knows his test subjects are never in any real danger. And he never forces them to do anything, it's entirely their choice. Not to mention, he actually keeps coming up with better and better medicine. In fact, he doesn't deceive anyone. The only one who does is X in the cutscene of the first test day. Fang simply chooses not to react to it, maybe because he sees it as harmless. He trusts himself, he knows he's not deceiving anyone, but he doesn't trust other people. Double standards? Obliviousness. He has no idea this can be seen as ethically wrong. He's been isolating himself for so long, he is oblivious to social cues, nuances, and norms. If he means no harm, if he hides nothing, and if there's no danger, then there's nothing wrong with it. So now, let's move on to a slightly more unpleasant topic. Manipulation. Because people, including myself, are uncomfortable with how the player character manipulates Fang into liking them. How at first, to get any interesting results, we actually have to agree to Arvio's awful plan, do questionable things to trick Fang into thinking we're better than we actually are. But it backfires, and if we're sufficiently honest and remorseful, we actually prove that we are not that bad after all. The only problem is that we shouldn't do it in the first place. And we can, but not doing it brings no special rewards. Quite the opposite. Anyway, first we try to lie to him, and then we try to please him. We keep feeding him his favorite food and we give him his favorite book, and basically we keep reminding him about the only good time in his life, which in turn causes his brain to create positive association and allows us to get what we want. And what is this if not pure manipulation? But those are never our own ideas. It's still manipulation and we still have to play along, but it's not really us doing it. Actually, it's X. It's him who tries to put Fang in his happy place by reminding him of the good things and good times. He insists that Fang needs a friend. It's him who brings those ideas to us, most of the time, and uses us to nudge Fang in the desired direction. He agrees to Arvio's stupid plan mostly because it's convenient and, frankly, because the builder is involved, because normally he chases Arvio away. He still gets to change the plan the way he likes it, Arvio gets to be the bad guy and we get to play the hero, because X already knows, after saving Private Raven, that we are more or less the type of person he's looking for, and more on that later. So he is the mastermind behind finding Fang someone to trust, or rather forcing Fang to trust someone. He brings us a gift for Fang and tells us to go apologize. He is the one that gives us the mapo tofu recipe and tells us to make it and give it to Fang. Granted, at first he goes to Arvio with that, but Arvio predictably fails and we end up preparing it anyway. And afterwards, X always comes to us. He comes to us for help when Fang gets sick, he tells us about the book, he is even, conveniently, not there when Fang needs his help while working, as if he knows that the builder is gonna stop by and save the day. I believe this feathery bastard knows exactly what he's doing. He does mean well, but he is a master manipulator. Unfortunately, he has to be, because Fang is the master of obliviousness. But I'm starting to suspect that Fang actually weaponized this obliviousness and hides behind it to avoid inconvenient reality. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is that manipulating Fang into becoming our friend is not entirely on us. It doesn't change the fact that some of the interactions with Fang are genuinely unfortunate. So long as we're just friends, it's fine, but as soon as we select one of the romantic dialogue options, it becomes creepy. Because Fang doesn't seem to be entirely aware of our intentions. Like, he's incapable of fully grasping the concept of an adult relationship, and we are taking advantage of his lack of awareness. There's a difference between missing a couple of hints and being completely unable to get them. But maybe that's not the case. We've already established that he has trouble reading social cues, but that doesn't make him intellectually challenged. Besides, he's a doctor, he's bound to know the simple facts of life, at least in theory. So no, I don't think we're actually taking advantage of someone's total innocence. During the first play date, if we suggest it could be something more than friendship at some point, he generally declines. He says that he's happy with that relationship as it is now. So yeah, he knows what's going on. But even claiming he's not interested, he will accept the heart knot. And this is where we're missing content, because it makes no sense. I guess something will happen that will change his mind. So yeah, obviously we don't know the whole story. But even so, I admit that in the name of telling the story the way the writers want to tell it, we are still being railroaded into doing specific things in a specific way a bit too much. Nevertheless, let's wait and see where it goes. Now, about the whole duality I mentioned before. There are two versions of Fang. It's not split personality, even though, as I said, he behaves in two different ways, but more along the lines of two methods he uses to approach the world. He is initially very distrustful, curt and cold, but that's his defense mechanism. By being distant, he tries to conceal how vulnerable he actually is, so he can be both. And one exists to protect and shield the other. And as he begins to trust us more and we learn more about him, he lets us, and then other people as well, take a peek at his warmer side. Of course, at first he does it under protest. He really hates lowering his guard and depending on strangers. But it's obvious that he probably should, especially since circumstances force him to seek help. He has to get out of his shell, step out of his comfort zone, not only to coexist with other people, but to simply exist and live and be able to support himself. Why? Well, this is pure speculation and it's kinda sad, so just take it with a huge grain of salt, but, well, for me it works. It's still sad, but it works. Well, Fang can only function the way he does when X is around, as long as X is around. Without him, Fang is unable to tie his own shoes, and X realizes that. He's just a raven, but he's a talking raven from a video game, so yeah, he realizes that. He's been with Fang for a very long time, and he's a really old bird. So when he uses the voice of Fang's mother to tell him, "I'm not always gonna be here," he probably doesn't only mean he wants some free time. He is actually kind of preparing Fang for his inevitable death. And he knows now is the time to do it, because he probably doesn't have that much of it left. And before you start to panic, no, I don't think X is going to die in this game, because we all know what happens when a character we like dies in the My Time series. Batia has to write an additional ending for an entire questline. But the fact is, X is not gonna be there forever. It's logical, no matter the reason. Okay, so let's not go dark places, let's just say that he only wants some me time, which also makes sense because he's been a caregiver for many years and he's bound to be a bit tired. Either way, he needs to make sure that Fang has someone else to turn to, but ideally that he can actually deal with his life on his own. Gaining independence is probably the most important aspect here, for both Fang and X. Besides, Fang's independence from X has additional meaning. X is the bridge between Fang and the memory of his mother, and this is an umbilical cord that desperately needs cutting. That duality I was talking about before rules Fang's life. He has two modes, vulnerable and armored. There are two driving forces behind everything he does, idealized love and fierce hatred. Not to mention the Doctor of Sandrock is actually two characters, Fang and X. And when they're out in public, it's basically impossible to talk to only one of them. But that duality also applies to X himself. He's a pure reflection of Fang's personality and problems, his past and his current life. He quotes many people and uses multiple voices, but two of them are the most distinctive. A nice, soft voice that encourages and praises, and an unpleasant voice that scolds and chastises. And listening to X in the cutscene when he explains how he wants to impress Coco, it was like watching the scene from The Lord of the Rings where Gollum argues with himself. It was really unsettling and actually really good. So, if all goes well, this will be a story of personal growth, embracing the inner change, and letting go, and about independence. I still would like Fang's problems that he ran away from, meaning his father, to catch up with him and force him to face and defeat his inner demons, but with letting go as the main goal. I said before that I don't think X is going to die, but I have to admit it would make a lot of sense in this context. However, I think we can do without excessive drama, and it will be enough if X and Fang simply regain their autonomy, become unstuck, so to speak, because for now, especially in the beginning, before Fang starts to open up, they're basically glued to one another. Fang should learn to finally face the world without the constant need of hiding behind someone, be it the bird or the builder, make peace with himself, and create a whole independent personality from those two different versions of himself. But to do that, he needs both versions to mature in a way. He needs to stop tripping over his own feet. If we call those versions his light side and his dark side, well, then he's like a broken fluorescent tube. So he needs those two versions to reach a certain natural conclusion. And as I already said, let go. His soft, weak, childish side stopped maturing very early, basically the moment his mother died. So he never got a chance to naturally grow out of it. And his dark side, his anger, never got resolved because apparently he never faced it. So, mothering him for a while, we actually give him a chance to get some things out of his system. And thinking about it like that actually helps me personally, because I dislike the idea of mothering anyone for any reason, especially a grown person. So we can assume that doing that we're actually helping him get that closure. But that's also exactly why we need him to be forced to face his enemy, his dark side, at some point, to reach another conclusion. Because both sides of his personality originate in unresolved problems, and so he needs to deal with them, grow out of them, and mature. And then form a new, independent person. Okay, now that I analyzed Fang to this degree, I assure you I realize it's just a game, and not a very serious one at that. I do not expect it to handle certain problems in a realistic or even quote-unquote healthy way. I don't. Just like I don't expect the Roadrunner cartoons to depict violence in a realistic way. So no, I'm not really that serious about it. But I like it and I'm quite invested, and overanalyzing is fun, at least for me. Okay, so that's it. That's all I wanted to say. I promise the next video is going to be about something else, because having a channel entirely dedicated to one character from one game was never my intention. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I see you in the next one. Take care.